Just a quick heads up, this episode might contain a little colorful language.
So I would say my next venture into managing these voices is to see if I can't unite them with other voices and see where it goes. Because just like when I'm in the kitchen cooking, I don't start with anything but a muse, just an idea.
I'm Leon Davis, and this is One Good Question. Welcome to the first episode of One Good Question. I'm your host, Leon Davis. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. Before we get started, let me go ahead and let you know what One Good Question is all about. The purpose of this podcast is to ask interesting people one unique question and allow their answers to speak for themselves. I purposely designed this to be less of me. What I mean by that is I want as little of my commentary to come through in the interview as possible. I really want the guest answer to be the star of the show. I feel that right now is my opportunity to sit back, listen, and learn from the experiences and perspectives of other people. And I hope that I bring you some content that speaks to you also. The phrase, less of me, I borrowed that from our guest today, Brandon Bedford. Brandon is a great friend of mine. I've had the opportunity to work with him in the past, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with him in the future. Brandon is what I consider my creative doppelganger. He's the only person I've ever met that has a restless creative mind that works like mine. So it's no surprise that we're talking about creativity today. We really had a great time doing this, and I think that it comes through in the interview. So with no further delay, here's Brandon Bedford answering his one good question. All right, Brandon, you are one of the few people I've met with a creative mind as restless as mine. I find myself continually searching for tactics and strategies to manage the volume of ideas and to act on that creativity. So what are some of the things you do to manage the voices and scratch your creative itch?
I would say first and foremost, I found a long time ago, maybe like 10 years ago, the more I try to put structure on the management of it, it kind of stifled the creativity. So what I try to do without getting in the way of my daily life, without getting in the way of responsibilities, because on any given day, I can just fly away with ideas or just things that are popping into my head. So what I try to do now is I more manage the time I spend, not the ideas or not what I'm going to do with the ideas. And I found once I relaxed a little bit and just let myself dream, then the ideas became a little more vivid, a little more high def in my brain. Before, I was trying to think of a restaurant idea. I would have a parameter on my idea, and I would try to develop the idea within the boundaries. And once I realized that the boundaries weren't for that phase, the boundaries are for building, right? So in that creative space, and I love that you call it the voices, because you're the first person to call it the voices, and it's bullseye on a word I could have used if I would have thought of it first. It's just right there. But if I just let the voices talk, then, and sometimes they argue.
Yeah, I've been there.
Then I really just find myself more listening versus anything else. But some actual exercises I do is I write a lot of things down. I find writing things down, it's almost like a tangible way of letting something out. It's in my head and it's intangible, and then I write it down and it manifested now. It's a small detail, but something about the way that my thoughts work or my brains work. Once it's on paper, it's tangible, and it just simmers the fuck down in my brain, because now it almost it's like the voice knew it got out. It was heard, and it was heard because I put it down and my eyes saw it. But what I tend to do, which is a way to manage it, quote unquote, but it's more of a way to organize it, because sometimes I want to go back and listen to my own voices, is I have a big stack of notebooks. And you told me once that you had a big stack of notebooks that you called the voices. And I thought, holy shit, I found him.
Yeah. I have notebooks everywhere. My wife hates it. She's like, why do you keep buying notebooks?
There's another one of me.
Yeah.
We should unite and make a clan. There might be more.
Yes, exactly.
But up until then, I've heard of people having journals or sketchbooks or whatever, but I've never known someone to have like, they might have a stack because of another reason, but I have like an ongoing stack. So that's not my only method, but for sure I take those notebooks and just channel a lot of it. And then I would say the next thing that I do that's worked the best for me is to talk about my ideas or my little creative voices. And I didn't used to do that. I started doing that as an adult because when I was younger, I did the opposite. I would stuff it down. I felt a little bit like a less amazing Goodwill Hunting. Like I had all this in me, and that wasn't the surroundings that I chose. That wasn't the friends that I kept. I mean, these were people that I loved, and it was me, but I had like this piece of me that I would stuff and constantly stuff and just never let breathe. But now I do the opposite. So when you're talking about a podcast idea, it takes about 1.2 seconds to go through my crazy brain. And then immediately I'm just going to spit out ideas. And I find that people are really receptive to that kind of conversation, just people in general. If what you're saying is improvements in an encouraging fashion on their idea, like basically I try to give gifts of little nugget gold. And some people take that and they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Some people take it and it's like, holy shit, this is now a bedrock. This is a core value of the company I'm starting. So
Yeah.
I've seen different results, but the result isn't why I do it. It's more of a release for me. And ideally, one day, we'll see, I really am going to spend more time on who I spend my time with and see if I can't really build, because I've heard like successful people talk about it. See if I can't really build a crowd around me of just creative minds that encourage my thoughts, that I can encourage theirs, because I totally would be down for that team. So I would say my next venture into managing these voices is to see if I can't unite them with other voices and see where it goes. Because just like when I'm in the kitchen cooking, I don't start with anything but a muse, just an idea. And by the end of it, I mean, all right, I guess I'm making soup. I could have been making a cheesesteak in the beginning. Sometimes I just let it go, and I'd love to be like in a think tank type. I don't know. Maybe I should start a club.
There's a lot of guys that talk about that. It's really just surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And that's definitely one of those spaces that I hope that this will help me do also, just kind of help put me in spaces with people who help encourage and develop voices. So
that's probably the most exciting thing for me. I mean, for you, but like in my brain, exciting for you about this, because like sometimes I listen to Rich Roll. Sometimes, there's Joe Rogan will catch me once in a while, really interested. But the idea of what they get to do is just sit down and talk to cool people, and like really cool people. This isn't Jimmy Fallon, which I like, but like he's talking to famous people that want to promote things. Just talking to cool people with cool ideas. You got to find a way to pay the bills on this one, dude. You're gonna move that needle, dude. Any creative aspect where I can lean on as a way to support myself, because we are in the real world.
Yes.
Anytime I get to do that, then the needle moves immediately.
Yeah.
I just see it. It's all of a sudden I'm successful at this thing, and it's because I'm able to put the time and the energy into it. And if ever, Aunt Clara, the multimillionaire I've never met, dies and leaves me an inheritance, like we're getting started right away.
So let's move on to the house question.
Let's get to it.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite parts. So now we have a house question that we ask everybody. It doesn't ever change. What is the one piece of advice you've received and ignored that when you look back you wish you would have taken?
So I thought about this one, and honestly, the reason I ignored it was because I saw it as like this, not at the time I didn't know. I saw it as like this dead cliche of worthlessness. Like if someone says beating a dead horse, you don't picture a man whipping a horse on the ground, just hitting it over and over. Like you don't get the visual, right? So it was just dead. So someone told me multiple times, but one person in particular that was very valuable to me, and their advice was things that I've taken advantage of, and really used to my advantage. I mean, they said, follow your heart. And if you follow your heart, the success will come. And I heard that with such a young mind. I was 18 and I discounted it to zero. And now here I am, over 20 years later, realizing that when I was 18, I was at the starting point, and that was the direction I should have gone. And I certainly don't have regrets that are deep about that, because I don't know, there's many 18-year-olds out there that listen to anything worthwhile that's put into their brain from another place of straight up wisdom. And it was such a simple piece of advice, but I knew back then what made me tick. I knew back then what fueled my creativeness. I knew back then who I was, even though I was newly discovering it and kind of hiding that person from the world. But I would be on a different trajectory now if back then I would have followed my heart. So I wanted to go to culinary school. I wanted to write. Back then I liked to draw and paint quite a bit, but the world snuffed that advice in my brain because culinary school was expensive. I didn't have a means to pay for it. You weren't going to make any money, tap dancing on the street corner. And basically, at a very pivotal point, I decided to join the military and start my life, which honestly, those 4 years were probably the least creative years I've ever had in my life, at a point where I could have been just boundless and no responsibilities, I could have just done anything. And instead, I did buckle down and finish college during that period, but it was business school. There was just no creativity there. And so even though this great nugget of advice that's just follow your heart and the rest will follow, you will be successful, I did the opposite. All right, so I need a steady paycheck. What is more steady than the government? I don't even think they have the money. They're just writing checks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That money spends well for me when I deposit it, right? So I literally just did the opposite. I went to business school. I joined the military. I couldn't have been in a situation where I was required, not able, required to think less. That's how the military works. That's how a lot of structured classes in business school work. Let me tell you about the Maslow hierarchy of needs. It's like that. What? Okay. That makes sense, but it's like, what? It didn't feed me at all, right? So looking back, had I had a moment, maybe a retreat, maybe a walk in the woods, it didn't have to be anything extensive. Had I really just digested that advice and sat down with it and then put pen to paper and said, this is my game plan, even if I only had the first couple steps, I think now I'd be in a situation, or could be, there's a lot of assumptions and what ifs there, but I could be in a situation where I'm just taking advantage of creative outlets that just organically grow in my brain, versus now what I do is I try to make sure that those creative voices don't die. And I try to water them as much as I can because I don't want them to die. It's just a selfish need of mine. I don't ever want to just wear what everyone else wears and do what everyone else does and say what everyone else says and think what everyone else thinks. And from the beginning, if I would have just taken that advice and ran with it wholeheartedly, because that's the way it was given to me. It was given to me in a sense that you have a specialness about you. If you make that your heading, your bearing, then you will be successful. That's the way the advice was bestowed to me. And what I heard was, don't be a dead horse. I heard a dead cliche that couldn't have done any value because of my mindset at the time and the space my head was in. And then that person that gave me that advice has passed. And it wasn't until then that I kind of went all the way full circle, was thinking about my time with him, was thinking about our conversations, as limited as I had with them. All of a sudden I was like, wow, you gave me rocket fuel. I turned around and took a Twinkie. I took the most garbage fuel there is and just, let that one go.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. That's awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for out of this question. That's awesome, man. So yeah, a little bit of something that we can take forward and apply it to, and hopefully some 18-year-old will eventually listen to this and actually take whatever advice somebody's giving them.
If you're out there, please listen and take that advice. That is not shallow advice. That can go as deep as you creatively can go. Just if your heart is in it, the things that make it successful is rarely the environment, is rarely the skill set. Like all of that comes. Like I wasn't born a great cook. I liked cooking. And then what happened is, I'll be on, I'm going to toot my own horn here. I'm a badass cook now. Right? So that is a result of the following. That, I wasn't born with some talent. Like I just liked it, and I liked it enough to channel it and funnel it and explore it and refine it. And, once in a while show it off, or once in a while I'm just at home alone, like, geez,
Yeah.
happy as can be. This is the best thing I've ever had. So I just think there's a lot of examples in my life where if I would have focused and put it down, it would have probably at least started a different path.
All right. Awesome, man. I can't think of anyone better to have started this endeavor with, so I appreciate you being the very first interview that I had. All right. So once again, I appreciate it. And so
Hell yeah.
And thank you for being my first guest. Yeah, this is really great. I appreciate it. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. And then in 18 months from now, we're going to toast to you and your full-time endeavor.
Yeah.
I won't step over toes like your family and important people and say I'm your first fan, but I'm going to say I'm your first guest.
All right, man. So I got to get going, but I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk later, man. Thank you.
Awesome, bud. Thanks so much.
All right. That's episode 1 in the books. I want to give a big thank you to my good friend Brandon Bedford for giving us his time with this interview today. Look for some great bonus footage from this interview. A lot of what we discussed doesn't translate into audio, so I will be releasing it at a later date on YouTube. Once again, I appreciate each and every one of you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for listening to One Good Question. I'm Leon Davis. Theme music by DJ Seth Lowry. Find us on Spotify and Apple Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. For a full list of where to find us, check out our Facebook page, or click the link in the show notes.